Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of CILTS Singapore, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are. We understand we have about 17, 18 countries represented in this webinar all over the world, and we're grateful that you are setting aside time to participate in this webinar. I think it is important to understand the broader motivation for this webinar because, as you know, global trade, over 95% is on maritime shipping and so on. And increasing the last few years, post-COVID, there have been a lot of major shipping disruptions globally, which affect trade and day life, causing port congestion and so on. So as a result of these disruptions and port congestion, any kind of crisis, an oil spill may seem to be a small thing, but don't forget, an oil spill can disrupt operations in a port if it's large enough, can be a big fire, can be explosion. So see the link with broader maritime trade, shipping as an industry, at the same time logistics, they're all interrelated, including port infrastructure. That's significant. In Singapore, as you know, we're one of the, or rather second largest maritime port in the world. We are the largest bunkering port. And you know, we have over 140,000 ships calling in Singapore annually. You know, we have more than 50,000 ships passing through the Straits of Singapore a year, you know, and we have over 1,000 vessels at any time in the Singapore port at any time, you know. And if you look at fuel alone, you know, we have delivered more than 42 million tons of fuel a year. And this year, apparently, we've got record fuel sales, including the capacity to have biofuels, including ammonia, as well as methanol. So with all these developments and all this kind of traffic forecast, an oil spill may seem insignificant, but for us, the Singapore Port authorities and the industry takes it very seriously. So this is the backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to bear in mind. And it's my pleasure now to introduce the speakers for this webinar, which is going to focus on the nature of vessels that are used in the oil spills, as well as the critical importance of the human factor and technology. Our first speaker is going to be Captain Chong. Captain Chong is the port master and senior deputy director involved in maritime safety and port operations. He's got a master's degree from Sweden Environmental Administration University, Maritime University, and Melbourne. And he's been a veteran in the Singapore Maritime Port Authority, a very experienced man. And it is my pleasure now to invite Captain Chong to share his thoughts on this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamjit, and I'd like to welcome all for attending this webinar. It's morning here in Singapore. Morning, everyone. Good evening for those at a different time zone. And I'm very happy. I'd like to thank CILT for inviting me, giving me this opportunity to share some of the experience, especially Singapore side. What is our strategies when we come to combating of oil spill? And once again, thank Kamjit for painting that the backdrop amongst how busy is Singapore port and the number of ships that is passing Singapore Straits. And at any one times, we have about 1,000 ships in our port. So basically, if we look at our anchorages, our fairways, it is all full of ships moving at anchors, you know, doing marine services, taking bunkers. Yeah, so that's just how busy is our port. As Kamjit mentions about that, we are one of the second busiest port in the world. And one of the challenges, one of the challenging things that we face, the challenge is that we have limited sea space. So because of that, ships are basically, you know, the interaction between ships to ships in the anchorage, in the fairways, are really close. So that is why for MPA, we have a very strong safety procedures in place when ships interacting with one another. Strict navigations rules that they have to comply when they are in the anchorage and in the fairways. Well, I'll dive deep into the subjects that I would like to present today. It is oil spill incidents, the area cover vessels, human factors especially, and the technologies. So I will focus a lot more on what actually happened, that how Singapore deal with one of the case that the oil spill that happened in June last year. So I first just go into the overall strategies, how MPAs prepare ourselves, deal with various incidents. So the overarching strategy that we have, we go to the 2P and 3R concepts. The P stand for prevention, preparedness, response, recovery, and review. So I will start sharing on Singapore experience and strategies in oil pollution, preparedness, response, followed by various cooperative mechanisms that Singapore has with our neighbors, ASEAN states, and after that we have some Q&A. So when I dive down deeper into how we respond to the incidents that happened in June, and including the new fuel concepts that's coming, everything fit largely into these concepts of 2P and 3R. So just a quick one, as I say, prevention is better than cure. Hence, prevention is still the best strategy. Here, we prevent the occurrence of any incidents through a series of measures, which include enhancing navigational safety in our port waters, educating the maritime community on pollution prevention, and enforcement. For example, we have a state-of-the-art vessel traffic information system where we have multi-radar tracking system to track some 10,000 targets all around Singapore Straits and in our port waters. This system helps us to monitor and predict. It has a predictions that the operator will be alerted if there's any, by the system of any impending collisions, and this information will relate to the shipmaster. So if there's any alarms that we see that, we cited, alerted by the system, there is a collisions, with timely information, we will pass it down to the master. That's how we are able to manage such a busy port. So at least 7 enforcement craft that's been patrol our waters to ensure that all ships and craft are in compliance with port regulations. Now, MPA inspector also conduct regular checks to ensure that safety measures on boards are being observed. And the preventions of pollutions of CX, or we call it the PPSA 1990, was passed to enable Singapore to accede to the international conventions for the preventions of pollution from ships 1970, or the MAPO Convention. That is our preventions that we have put in place. And come to preparedness, despite having all these measures to prevent occurrence of incident in our waters, we must still be prepared for the worst. MPA has the Marine Emergency Action Plan, which is a national contingency plan for all marine emergencies such as collision, grounding, fire, search and rescue, oil and chemical pollutions. The oil spill contingency plan is a subset of this emergency action plan, which enable MPA to call upon resources from the oil industry and response companies during an oil spill. As all stakeholders from both governments and private entities are parties to this plan, this ensures a common understanding between all parties and thus faster response in the event of an oil spill. To ensure that Singapore remain prepared, MPA organized annual multi-agency oil spill exercise to test out and also to demonstrate our readiness to tackle any oil spill. So MPA has also signed a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with ITOF, to preset the agreed rates of vessels and equipment to deploy thus reducing the disagreement, expediting the recovery process. So this MOU is very useful, that it has an agreed rate of the resources that, like craft, vessels, how much is it? It's all agreed at the industry level, so that when come to emergency, there's no time to discuss, to negotiate the cost or the price. It is all for in this MOU, and everything will focus on actions. Then come to response. Under the Oil Spill Contingency Plan, NPA employed the use of 3 tiers response of oil spill emergency. The following categories, we have Tier 1 for minor oil spill, Tier 2, an oil spill where the extent of pollution is wider, but the situation is contained at sea and would not extend to land. Such an incident requires combined activations of the vessel capability, terminal, and NPA resources. For Tier 3, it's a large scale of oil spill, which will affect our national interest. Such an incident requires a full turnaround of all resources from the vessels, terminal, NPA, and other private and government response organizations in Singapore and even overseas, such as our neighbors, Indonesia and Malaysia, where we need to have a system where or procedure to activate all the joint resources. Similarly, all seaward operation will be directed by NPA through our Emergency Operation Committee. These are some of the tools that NPA and a third-party response company such as Oil Terminal have to combat oil spill. I come to recovery. Of course, the fight against an oil spill doesn't just stop here. It is equally important that we have a proper procedure to dispose of the recovered oil. Oil that is recovered from the sea by skimmer is collected in a storage tank, brought to our approved reception facilities for proper treatments and disposal. If the oil slick hit land, our National Environment Agency, or NEA, will be activated to coordinate shoreline cleanup and come towards the end, which is the review. Well, after all the actions is done, we are not going to expect one more, and how are we going to do it better? So NPA regularly review our oil spill contingency plan to ensure that it remains relevant and effective. The oil spill contingency plan is tested annually through our oil spill exercise, which I explained earlier, which serve as an important platform where various documents of the plan, including SOP and contact lists, are all updated. Valuable lessons learned from past oil spill incidents are all incorporated inside this plan. So every time when we carry out our exercise and every time that we responded to a oil spill incidents, all these lessons learned will be reviewed and further strengthened, incorporate into our procedure, our plan, and make it better. On the next slide, it shows our crisis management structures when an incident has happened. So at a strategic level, on top, the Transport Crisis Management Group, or we call the CMG, it will be chaired by the Permanent Secretary of MOT, Ministry of Transport. And then below is our MPA. And at our operational level, which is me, I will be the chair of our Emergency Operations Committees, where below we have supported by different cells. So this complete the full response, how we organize ourselves at the management level, where we involve operation planning cell, info management, ships and survey, technologies and information cells, logistics cell, international relations cells, manpower, and many other supporting agencies such as Coast Guard, police force, our firefighting, the Singapore Civil Defence Force, and many more other agencies. And we also have the others, such as the private sector coming from the tug operators. We may need their resources. The ferries operators, such as continue to help us to carry out surveillance. Terminal operators, transport services, salvage companies and all. So this is a complete setup that to ensure that how we stay on top of the whole incidents to manage it, getting all the information, resources right to ensure that myself have an overall pictures in control of the situations and also able to update up to a ministry level how we manage it. Because after all, media will be chasing behind asking for updates. That is why that this is a very strategic and a very good structures that we have been tested over the years, over many exercise and over many oil spills incident that we have managed. Well, next, just want to share a little bit more that the how we communicates with our neighboring states. We have an ASEAN Regional Oil Spill Contingency Plan. Well, this is developed under the MOU of the ASEAN Cooperation Mechanism. So if there is a transboundary oil spill that involve many other countries in ASEAN, well, this contingency plan will be out in the table for further discussions. Closer to Singapore, we have a revolving fund committees. This is a mechanism for member states, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore to request and provide support for oil spills. So we have a regular meeting with Indonesia and Malaysia to strengthen our contingency plan. And also when coming to fundings, where to draw emergency funds to combat the oil spills. And I mentioned earlier about the MOU with ITOF. It is an agreed rate for vessels and equipment that we're going to deploy. This cut down really a lot of time in negotiating the cost. What is the best cost, to hire a craft to combat the oil spill. So these are all the preparedness that we have done. So when coming to emergencies, it's all for actions. It's no more for planning and discussions. Well, on the next slide, I will just share a little bit one of the classic case that we NPA deal with it, which is last year, 14 June. Well, some of you have heard before, the shipmaster of Marine Honors reported that she was collided by another dredger, Vox Maxima, at one of the busy container terminal or Pasir Panjang container terminals, and about 400 metric tons of the bunker fuel immediately discharged out to sea. So this is we understand that through investigations, the dredger lost its power and its rudder was stuck at a certain angle that it went straight into the cargo tanks of the Marine Honors. And with that big hole that can see from the pictures, immediately 400 metric tons of oil spill into sea. So our actions is to immediately determine where is all these ships, where is all this oil will go. It is not like, spilling a coffee on the tables or on the floor that it will stay there. As explained by our transport minister, it is when oil go into waters, it will be carried by sea, carried by wind, the tidal current conditions. Well, if a coffee spill over on the tables, well, I can take times to go and grab, a tablecloth or even a mop to come back here and clean. I don't need predictions. Where is this coffee going to drift to? So on the next slide, you can see that immediately our teams have to run our oil spill prediction model to see where is this oil will go. Another challenging situation that in Singapore that we face because of the tidal current in the Singapore Straits, the current sometimes can go up to 3 knots. 3 knots is the speed is really fast. That any oil that spill over on our waters, in a matter of times, within an hour, it will be carried 3 nautical miles away from the locations of origins. So it is very important that if we want to prepare any of the oil spill response resources, we have to look forward, able to predict where is all this oil will go, and also alert all the government agency and so that they can put up the necessary preparedness, right, to combat oil. And because the close proximities of all our landward terminal resources, especially Sentosa, which is so close next to it, it is within hours that the oil will hit the shore. So for Singapore, such a busy port where ships are anchored and moving very close to our coastline, it is really challenging for all the resources to be deployed to contain it before the oil can hit the shores. So that is why we already have a lot of plan to minimize this impact to any coastal damage to our islands, to our any places of interest. Example like Sentosa, which is heavily visited by tourists all over the world. On the next chart, on the next slide, also some of the spill response assets that we deployed to combat these incidents. Applied dispersal was our immediate actions plan so that we can break down all this oil out at sea. Hopefully that we can minimize as much oil as possible before it reach our shorelines. And also laying of booms and skimmers deploy within the next 12 hours to 24 hours. Assets will keep calling in, and booms will also lay up in the next few days ahead. And resources, when we activated our other agencies, they also quickly alert all their manpowers to come down to do the coastal cleanings. And on the seaward sides, we activated our tugs and all the spill response craft. And also you can see from the picture, the current buster, which is able to trap the oil and then skim it, at the end of the current buster is formed like a reservoir to collect all the oils. Moving on, this cleanup effort, we also use new other technologies, which is in the next slide. You can see that some of the oils, because of our, when we station some on a boat, we do have difficulty seeing it because of the reflections of the sun. So the best way is to use drone. Drone can fly up with at a certain altitude with a higher vantage point to scan where are all the oils that has drifted to. And with that, we will deploy our resources ahead. So some of the pictures, which is I share on this slide, the earlier one and this one, you can see that this picture taken from drones, it gives us a very good understanding what is the spill, the amount of the oils that is around, and this allows us to direct our craft and how to positions themselves and clear the oils at sea. And well, of course, the higher ground, the better view. That is why the next slide, you can see we have to use satellite. We use satellite to monitor where are all the oils that are going to. That gives us an even higher vantage point from the sky. Look down, where is the oil has reached our shorelines. From the Sentosa to our east coast, southern waters, some of the islands. And in fact, we can see that some has already also reached out to area in Malaysia in Pengerang. I forgot to inform that at the time where the spill came, immediately that we activated our RFC procedure, which I explained earlier, to alert all our neighbors of the spill. And same, we keep update our neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia, the trajectory, and also get update from them whether the oil has reached any of their shoreline. Next. Landward cleanup operations, some of the pictures, oils has reached using drones to take some of the picture where other area has reached our coastline. This to keep us a good situational pictures on where the area that hit worse by the oil. And as I mentioned earlier, this oil is carried by tidal 24/7. So some of the area that we clean, the next morning, the oil come back again to the shoreline. So we have to keep deploying our drones to look out for all this area. And next, some of the phases of operations: emergency phase, project phase, and polishing phase. How emergency phase deploy our resources and removal of any stranded oil, and after that, clean up all the areas. On the next slide, on the human factor part, well, most of the people involved they are basically harbor craft. They are employed in our port, and also workers that doing the shoreline cleanup. We have a Workplace Safety and Health Act to ensure that all activities are governed. The employer has to ensure their safety, make sure that they have their personal protective equipment. And also those workers that are deployed out at sea, they receive proper trainings to how to deal with oil spill to ensure their safety out at sea. And also the agency have to ensure that, you know, during June, it was the hottest month, to make sure that all the staff, all the workers are doing the cleaning, they are taken care of, adequate resting, and plenty of water to drink so that they can continue the cleaning effort. And next, some of the technology that we use, we in fact have even, this is the best opportunity for us to try out new technologies. We even use a drone to hook on the high pressure hose to do cleaning on area that we couldn't reach. And we also engage our firefighters to use their high pressure water jet to wash some of the rock bunds around coastal area that, you know, it is not safe for human to reach. And also to use a 3D object LiDAR to scan the casualty vessel, which is Marine Honor, to see the extent of the damage and whether it affecting the stability of these vessels. Moving on, again on the technology part, our agencies also develop new apps in the next slide that will help whoever in the public to install this app. If they sight any oil, they can immediately update in this app so that government agency can receive all the information from public and attend to any oil that's stranded out at sea. And next slide, on the engagement with industry, it is also a best time for us to engage with some of the industry for them to showcase what are the new technology they have, such as new absorbent boom, and what are the new dispersant or new technology that can help us so that in the next oil spill, we know what are the new things can help us to deal with oil spill more effectively. Next slide. Again, some of the technologies that the industry had, you know, bring forward to MPA for consideration or even try out at our exercise, the autonomous flotsam vehicles and also the flotsam clearance USV. Well, just that's the for the incident for the Marine Honor oil spill. I touch a little bit, a quick one, because I think some audience quite interested moving forward. Other than oil spill, what Singapore preparedness on other new fuel, marine fuel. On the next slide, some of the options on the future fuel, which I put it on the table, we have methanol, ammonia, LNG, and VLSFO. So over here show that the flash point, flammability of different properties of the fuel that we are dealing with. So in the next two slides, I'll just share that the methanol bunkering operations that we have tried out in Singapore. So we are no longer dealing with just oils, residual oils that hit our shore. For methanol and ammonia, it is more about the flashpoint, explosions, toxicity to humans. So for that, again, we have to use the strategy that how we deal with it to manage the future operations of future oil. Next. On the next slide, how we prepare when before we MPA carry out the methanol bunkering. We have first engage all the industry to have workshops and carry out a tabletop exercise. What are the scenario? What are the risk management that we need to carry out, the hazard that we carry out, and we need to have the safety measure in place, the emergency response, and we carry out a ground deployments after everything, the paperwork's all put in place. We carry out a ground deployment exercise and to test all these safety procedures in place, just to validate them whatever discussed on the tables, it is applicable, is practical out at the ground. And before that, training is very important. We also conducted the methanol firefighting awareness program to ensure that whoever involved in these operations are all trained to understand the property of methanol, what kind of fire that they are dealing with, and including toxicity. For info, for a methanol fire, basically, it is not visible. It is invisible that the fire, it cannot be sighted by eyes. So it has to use thermal camera to detect where is the flame, where is the fire when coming to a methanol fire. That is why we need to have different safety gears and detections tools. On the next slide, some of the mitigation measure that we put in place to prepare for methanol bunkering. Lightning detections, because if there's any fume during lightnings, we need to be alerted so that we can stop the operations. As I mentioned, thermal imaging to detect if there is a fire, where is the fire, gas detector, whole system, and also PPE in place throughout the operations. And the next slide, asset that support the bunkering. We done a plume modeling that on that day, due to considering the wind directions, where if there's any leak of methanol plume, where it is likely going to go, so that we can clear this area away from any public and also our response craft and safety of our people. And also that we put our craft on standby. And you can see the lower picture, we flew a drones with thermal imaging capability to continue monitoring the operations. So in case if there is any methanol leaking and involve fire, our drone is the first tools that will alert us that whether there's any hazard to the people's safety during these operations. Well, that's come to my presentations. I think I'm overrun a little bit. Thank you, everyone. If there's any questions, I think we can come towards the end of these sessions and I'll take your questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Captain Chong, for that really, really illuminating presentation and with great depth, and particularly your last part where you're addressing some new biofuels like ammonia as well as methanol and the related implications in terms of not only port safety but also vessel safety and crisis management. Thanks again. It's my pleasure now to invite my dear friend, Ms. Punit Oza. Punit is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Ship Brokers in UK. He is also a senior adjunct fellow at the Maritime Port Authority, very experienced. At the same time, he's also a founder of Maritime Next, a platform which is dedicated for driving next maritime through investing, training, related consultancies and commercial shipping involving digital transformation. It is my pleasure now to invite Punit to share his perspectives on the theme of vessels, human factors, and technology. Punit.
Thank you so much, Karamjit. And thank you very much for the invitation. I must commend the CILT Singapore for doing this series. I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I'm really happy that we're getting a chance to present here. Captain Chong, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I think what MPA does and Singapore does as an ecosystem is a model for the global space now. So that's really impressive. Always to see how you actually complete the cycle of not just discussions and talk but actions. Today I'm actually representing both the Institute of Chartered Ship Brokers, of whom I'm privileged to be the current global president. And I also represent a startup in which I'm an investor and advisor called FrontM, which are both relevant in terms of this particular aspect of human factors in technology. So not to take too much of your time, let me just kickstart my presentation. What I'll talk a little bit about is oil spill in general and what my understanding is, and how it kind of ties in with the human factors in the tech space. So basically, that's the idea. When it comes to oil spills, the most common is what we saw, a tanker accident, where essentially we've heard and seen big pictures of these oil spills in past. What happened in Singapore, what Captain Chong mentioned, was a much smaller oil spill, but still quite significant, and obviously needed to have an action which MPA took pretty impressively. Then, of course, there are pipeline ruptures, some drilling operation issues, and then, of course, there are pure natural disasters which actually happen. So oil spills can actually be depending on the varying degrees at which they actually impact and how serious they can be. Operational spills are basically happening during the regular operations. Accidental spills are basically what Captain Chong mentioned about the Singapore incident in June. That was an accident due to collision. And then, of course, there are some intentional releases of oil. And that, according to me, is something which also needs to be clamped down, because they are also important to understand. And that's where the human factor comes into play in a big way. Obviously, the damage to the environment is the biggest issue, but there are also knock-on economic consequences of oil spills which need to be understood. And the communities which are dependent on ocean. And this is something which is very important to understand, that we are a part of a symbiotic ecosystem. We are basically servicing the global economy, but the global economy also depends on us in order for the servicing to happen. And if oil spill happens, it doesn't affect just that particular incident with those ships involved. It impacts everything around it, which is why the prevention is better than cure is a very important aspect of it. Human factors are at the foundation of what oil spill responses are all about. Even before the technology discussion happens, human factors are the first and foremost discussion, which most of the time needs to actually be talked about. So already, I think Captain Chong has mentioned in detail how the response was actually garnered and has been garnered by MPA. It's very similar to the global mindset, the global benchmarking. You have incident commanders like the command structure that Captain Chong has laid out. You also have people working in the background, people like marine biologists and others who actually help out by giving insights and specific advice on areas which need to be addressed when it comes to basically cleaning up the oil. And of course, the physical people who need to be saluted, who need to be acknowledged and appreciated. The cleanup crews who actually do a lot of the actual physical work of getting this oil out of the ocean. So I think all of them have got a human element involved, and they all need to be understood and first of all appreciated in terms of what they do. Whenever it comes to decision making, I actually believe, and this is a generic understanding of it, that there are 7 clear steps, and this is coming from UMass Dartmouth, and it actually is a very nice way of clearly depicting that your starting point is what kind of decision do you want to make, and that awareness is the first thing that needs to be brought in. After that, you start doing the other steps of gathering information, identifying alternatives, weighing the evidence, and then choosing among the alternatives that you have. That's the process of assessment. And then finally, you have action, and then you review your action and decision. That's your action process. So they all require knowledge, training, technology, and most importantly, a mindset change. But with oil spills and response to oil spills, there is one big difference, and that is these 7 steps need to be taken in a very quick manner. They need to be taken at a very fast speed, and speed is obviously the number one most essential aspect about oil spill response. Now, speed is basically a function of knowledge and experience. And knowledge is all about awareness, the information that needs to be processed and given information as quickly as possible to the right stakeholders so that they can actually be aware of what the challenge is and what the knowledge is all about. Experience, on the other hand, is providing the comfort with which one can act faster and with more confidence. if you've done this before, if you've done something before, you can actually act faster. You can actually do it saying, knowing that your default setting is already in place, you start moving faster and faster. So knowledge and experience together create the speed that is needed. And when both of them coexist, that is when you get the best possible results. So I remember a quote from Bill Bryant, who was at Stolt Nielsen, who mentioned it to me quite a few years ago. Experience is the knowledge that you get just after you needed it. And hopefully other people's experience can be then shared. This series of 3 webinars that CILT Singapore has held is exactly that. You're actually vaulting the experience of the experts, putting it out there so that other people can actually benefit from it before they need it or at the time they need it. So this is very, very useful, but speed is the most important part. So how does this work? Training is the fundamental aspect. Captain Chong has touched on how they look at training. Training for me is so important because it actually requires you to be regular in your training as well. Simulations, tabletop exercises, all of these aspects are important. But when it comes to an oil spill response, it's also important to understand that coordination among the agencies is very important. He's talked about the fact that you've actually alerted various agencies, but behind the scenes, a lot of these aspects are about coordination. And finally, on the new fuels, which he has touched as well, the training for new fuels is very, very important. We have used conventional fuels for years together, and we are aware of what conventional fuels are in terms of their behavior, in terms of their working, in terms of their qualities and characteristics. These new fuels are exactly the same thing like the ships that changed over from coal as a fuel to oil as a fuel many, many years ago. This is the kind of significant change that is happening. We need to be ready for that change, and training is going to be a big part of that discussion. Ammonia and methanol are just 2 parts of it. There are a lot more complex fuels which are coming, which will be required to make a carbon zero or a carbon neutral world in terms of shipping, right? So this is going to be a big part of that discussion. But then, of course, you have human factors which combine the training with that aspect. The first and foremost is physical demand. So you obviously have a long working hours when it comes to the maritime industry. I don't need to remind most of the people in the audience that during the COVID, it was only the ships that were plying around the world. And obviously that meant that essentially uh, the ship's seafarers were there on board for much longer period of time. Long hours are not unknown in the shipping industry, especially on board the ships. And that has obviously created its own challenges. Psychological aspects. I know there was questions on this. There was request to talk more about it, but the stress level requiring quick, speedy decision making is a very lethal combination if it's not done the right way. Fatigue management is one of the biggest issues which happen in all high stress jobs. Shipping is no exception. And effectively communication requirement. I saw that communication structure or the organization structure that Captain Chong had put out there. There were so many stakeholders, but there was a clear communication structure in place. There's an international communication cells which actually talk about managing these challenges in terms of making sure that everybody has the same level of information which actually can be used for acting at the same time. This is a very important part because humans need to actually work in cohesion and collaboration only when they know exactly the same information across the board. If you don't have information, you will get lost and there'll be literally like a spoke of a wheel breaking away. And then the wheel goes wobbly very quickly, right? I just want to mention a little bit about ICS. We guys are in the commercial shipping space. We are basically into education. We are the global standard in commercial shipping education. So while we don't educate people specifically in oil spills, what we try and do is that once you become members of ICS, we are actually upgrading knowledge through seminars and webinars and lots of other opportunities of doing it. But more importantly, we provide networking opportunities for our members and the industry bodies to come together. A CILT and the ICS discussion, for example, is a classic example of the fact that we are trying to get more people together to talk and share experiences. Networking is not just about having a drink with each other. It is about that, but it's more about sharing the experiences so that everybody is basically able to learn and become richer And that's the only way we can spread awareness, we can spread knowledge, and we can spread expertise. That is the work of ICS. It's a more than a century-old body. And obviously, there are more bodies like this across the maritime and logistics spectrum which actually do the same work. So we are very proud to be a part of that ecosystem. Now, when it comes to technology part of it, the human part is, of course, very important. But technology has now become a bedrock of how things are changing at a pace that never seen before. We are at the situation where we are doing things in years that used to take decades to do. And obviously, that's going to be a huge advantage. Prevention is better than cure. The root cause analysis is the first thing that needs to be done. And I will come to technology and fatigue management, which I think is the best example of how technology can be used to manage fatigue and to really solve the problem and prevent it rather than just try and delay or reduce the impact of it. Technology is a key enabler and human element within technology, because technology cannot exist on its own. Humans and technology have to coexist with each other at the end of the day, right? So there are three slides that I'll put on fatigue management and technology. We all wear Apple watches and Samsung watches and all that, but these wearable devices can actually be used in a big way to track fitness and heart rate and other aspects, which you can very quickly get onto the systems, which we can actually track whether the people are more active, less active, and are they actually showing signs of fatigue through their vital signs being changed. That biometric monitoring is actually happening even there today. On the same time, the AI can also start scheduling shift planning to optimize work and rest cycles. You can actually get real-time adjustment. You can actually integrate that with your own overall schedule happening even today. You will get alerts. You will have automatic alerts for resting period, and that's something which is actually very important. Please don't underestimate the value of a power nap, as they call it, and that's something which is very, very important. Environmental monitoring. Whenever you are in a high stress area involved in an incident like this, you need to make sure that the people who are in the cleanup space, who are actually helping the cleanup, need to actually be also aware of what's happening in the environment. All the aspects of temperature, noise level, quality of air, all these aspects are something that you need to monitor. Technology today exists for you to do it in the simplest possible way. Mobile applications are also available now. There are so many applications about break time reminders, hydration, and also communicating across the entire ecosystem through real-time communication devices as well. So all these things are actually rare already. I'm not trying to bring a future vision here. This is actually there already. Most interestingly, data analytics. I genuinely believe that data analytics is now becoming a lot more interesting because people are actually having predictive patterns of past, running simulations and scenarios for future, and then starting to actually build a model which can be implemented across industries, not just the maritime or the shipping industry, but across industries. We can learn a lot from the airline industry. We can learn a lot from other industries, how they manage fatigue, and use that in the maritime industry. That is happening now because startups are actually straddling multiple sectors and multiple areas. And finally, you have alert systems, which are basically different from just reminders. These are systems which actually have a break point, which means that if something is going above a particular number, immediately there is a break. And that break happens automatically like an emergency, which means that the next damage level is averted or avoided intentionally and immediately. This is something which is very, very important for us to understand. So fatigue management and technology have a huge advantage. I won't go too much in the drone side. I think Captain Chong has discussed a lot on drones, but basically surveillance and monitoring, Singapore has already taken lead. I know Hamburg does a lot of that as well, but there's a lot of people who get involved in that space. More and more companies are getting involved in drones now. They don't only just do surveillance, they also do cleanup assistance like Captain Chong showed. So obviously drones are definitely going to be a big part of it. A quick word on the front end side. I just wanted to highlight this because I'm involved in this myself. I see the value of this. This is a maritime super app that is basically specifically focused on seafarer training and seafarer welfare. So within the one app, we've got all these various aspects. There is a connect aspect, which means we can connect the entire ship and ship to shore communication in one single space. We can engage the seafarers and the shore side with each other in meaningful manners and learning experiences. We can actually build mental wellness and care and health aspects in that same application. We can also give them rest time for themselves through entertain, movie channels, multiplexes, all these aspects in one place. And finally, we are building modules and video-based and play-based training for creating learning environment. So this is just one example of what we are doing in the startup space. But there are lots and lots of technology solutions which are available. So companies should really start thinking about building that technology, integrating it into their business, and starting to actually make sure that things will change for the better going forward. So at the end of the day, you need to understand what the spills are and the severity level of the spills. You need to start understanding the human and the technology factors which can actually help manage the response of the spills. But most importantly, every time you learn something from like the June incident that MPA has shared, you actually start using that experience to make sure the same mistakes are not repeated the next time around. That's the way most human civilizations have grown, and we will grow at the same time. And that's exactly what I would like to talk about. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Karamjit, and thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Punit, for a very interesting presentation, especially about the human factors and technology, which sometimes people tend to underestimate because you get lost in the operational context where you don't understand the deep technologies involved increasingly in facilitating and improving these entire processes, including the crisis management part, which you alluded to the end, the kind of app that I hear. I know we're almost close to our end time, but I'd like to ask an interesting question to Captain Chong. And this will be very interesting as well for all our webinar participants worldwide. And also linked to the question of oil spill. So Captain Chong, you remember on the 13th or 14th of we recently in January, we had a Malaysian tanker that sank just off Pedra Branca in the Singapore waters, Singapore Strait. Although it turned out to be purely a rescue operation because all the 8 crew were saved and but there was a whole process involved with the coordination by MPA, and eventually an Indonesian vessel took them to Batu Ampang. But more importantly, there were 2 phases, as I understand. One, the rescue, search and rescue operation phase. The other one was vessel recovery. And I think it'd be interesting to know from MPA's point of view, the motivation for the vessel recovery, because that tanker could have been full of oil, right? And if so, was the oil spill, a potential oil spill, a major factor in the planning and deployment of resources for recovery? Captain Chong, please.
Well, so far we have been monitoring the sea area in the Singapore Straits, and also I mentioned earlier on in the presentations that we have a RFC framework. We have alerted the Indonesia and Malaysia about the tanker sunk at near the Horsburgh Lighthouse. So we have been getting updates, informations from across our neighbors to see whether any oils are sighted. So far, we have heard that no any sightings of oil in the straits, and also including those coastlines in Batam and Bintan. As I said earlier, our informations, how we need to coordinate with even commercial parties, like how we consistently getting update from all the regional ferries, any of the masters see any oil. So, well, thankfully, so far, there's no oil sighted. I would say that if there's any oil, likely it is still on board. So we are working with the ship owner side and the P&I club on the methods of how are they going to tap this oil out to ensure that there's no damage to the environment. So we are getting update I think at the moment it is still quite preliminary because after saving the 8 crew, the first things is our thought is that how to ensure that there's no damage to the environment, and regular updates from the P&I clubs, ships owner coming in, and we will continue to monitor to ensure that all the procedure in place to ensure that it doesn't when they recover any oil, it shall ensure that it won't cause any spill to the any waters around, affecting maritime traffic in the Singapore Straits. So looking at the updates until today, situation seems looks under control, that no oil is sighted, and the owners and the insurance is working on top of that to manage this the subsequent recovery of the oils and removal of the wreck.
Thank you very much, Captain Chong. Thank you for
Yeah.
updating, because I saw this in the newspapers. I was just curious what has been happening with the current incident, very recent, and obviously you're on top of it. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are almost at the last few minutes of the webinar. And I want to take up the point that my dear friend Punit made earlier about human factors. And in interest of time, I will not be too long, but in 2012, there was a major cruise ship that ran aground, and a lot of people died in Costa Concordia. I will urge all webinar participants, go into the internet and look at this case. Massive 3,000-4,000 staff on the cruise ship that turned and killed a lot of people. And the major factor was human factor. The captain not only did he jump ship, but the investigation revealed that he was totally negligent. He was having a love affair on board with his girlfriend. So here's a human factor. From a serious point of view, you can see if you have the master of the ship not focusing on his work and allowing the ship, from a navigational point of view, we went too close to the Italian coast in Giglau, Tuscany. This is the consequence. So do not underestimate the importance of training human factors. So I'll use the Costa Concordia case and everybody to research into that. It's very documented, and it became a very criminal case. The captain was jailed. And herein lies the challenge in investigations. I will now pass you on to my colleague, Edward. But before that, I'd like to thank Captain Chong and Punit for the outstanding presentation and generosity of time and researching it to share this with all our CRD colleagues locally and CRD colleagues worldwide, as well as other friends. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much again to Captain Chong,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Punit Osam, and also Chairman Kramjit for facilitating this session. And thank all our participants from across the globe, which I see from a lot of sister chapters as well as academia and everyone to join. I hope you find this sharing, even though it's a very short and brief, it's very rich, very practical, and very real incidents. And again, as what mentioned earlier, on CILT, we try to create the knowledge, practical experience to be shared so that we all learn from each other. And there's no one owning all of that. In fact, all of us can contribute to that to build a more rich knowledge platform. So I thank you for that. As promised, even though some of your questions that have been submitted during the registration are not able to be addressed live today, we have the support and agreement from both Captain Chong and Mr. Punit Osa to hand down the response in writing. And what we'll do, we'll summarize that and publish it back to all the participants. And this recording will be ready by next week, together with the question and answer. Please come back to our website or LinkedIn page to to check on those information. And for all our members, because the presentations are only the slides, soft copy only available to our members. So for all our CILT members can access that through our knowledge archive, and we'll publish an ebook thereafter. So once again, thank you very much. I hope that you find this session to be informative, practical, and real. And please look out for future webinar from CILT that will be continue on with the knowledge and more prominent, as well as the most relevant example that we'll be organizing. So thank you very much again, and Happy New Year to everyone, and best wishes to you all in 2025. Thank you, and you have a good day.